Welcome to Africa Speaks. I'm your host, Pamela Anchang. On today's show, I'm bringing you one of Africa's most influential professionals in finance and banking, Mr. René Awambeng, Global Head Client Relations at the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank. Mr. Awambeng, a Cameroonian national, is a member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants of the United Kingdom. Thank you for honoring our invitation.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Such a delight to be here, and I really appreciate all the good work that you and your team are doing to represent the diaspora and the immigrant community in the United States.
Quite the pedigree, Mr. Awambeng, but you know what, I'm just going to go to how I know you, René, because I want to first establish that I've known René for many, many years, and I can really attest to the power of hard work as reflected in you. Congratulations on all you've accomplished, brother.
Yeah, I mean, 30 years ago, I wouldn't have believed that we would be sitting here in New York and having this conversation.
It's unbelievable. It's massive, because when you think about the fact that when we were all growing up, and that's what the show is about, is to show evolution. When we were all growing up, you dabbled into a lot of things. You know, when I left Cameroon, you were a journalist, right? And then now you've evolved many years later into big financial institutions. I don't understand. How did you make the shift from journalism? We're supposed to be doing this, like you're supposed to be interviewing me, not me interviewing you, or interviewing each other.
No, I mean, thank you. We've come a very long way, and from very humble beginnings.
Yes.
I happen to have been in a family which owned a leading newspaper organization in Cameroon at the time when they were going through multi-party political change.
Correct.
With the advent of what you call multi-party democracy in Cameroon. So when I left the University of Cameroon, I had to work for my family business because there was no other means of survival. I had to work for this family business.
Oh.
Unfortunately, things went down. They went down. The newspaper organization became bankrupt, largely because of the political system in place.
Right.
And I was forced to go and look for a job. I can never forget this day when I was traveling from Douala to Yaoundé, 250-kilometer journey on a bus. I had gone to Douala to print the Cameroon Post at the time.
Exactly, Cameroon
We couldn't
Post.
afford the cost of printing it. The printers said he couldn't continue to provide us supplier credit, additional debt. All the advertisers were not paying their income.
Yes.
The staff weren't getting their salaries. The office rent was behind. I was sobbing. I was really sobbing for 2 hours on this bus, and I remember the what they call the preprint of the newspaper I had in my house. It was hands was all full of tears.
Wow.
Then I saw the national newspaper in Cameroon, Cameroon Tribune, and they had a job. This job was the British Council, and they were looking for an administrative assistant.
No kidding.
So I applied for this job, and I went for this job, and I was successful. And you can't believe it, this job was paying 125,000 CFA, which was really no money at the time.
At the time.
But I took this opportunity. Yeah. And 6 months into the job, I think there was a Chevening scholarship that was advertised. I walked to my boss's office and asked him, Terry, why can't I apply for this position? He said to me, apply. And I applied for Chevening, and I was a successful Chevening scholar. That's how I went to the UK to do my master's in business administration in finance. And again, when I finished my MBA, something really happened. I was sitting in the bath. I can never forget this day. I had already gone through the internship program to join Standard Chartered Bank. And the phone rang. The phone rang, and they said, look, René, can you come back to Cameroon and be the deputy managing director for the British Council? And I was like...
You couldn't believe it.
I couldn't believe it. So I went back to Cameroon. I was the deputy managing director of the British Council for like 2 years. But it was a civil service job for me. I wasn't born for the civil service. I was born to do something different.
Yes.
So I wanted to go back to banking.
Right.
Then EcoBank was setting up at the time across West Africa. So I remember now I applied for EcoBank, and I got admitted. I got accepted. I was actually the first staff that EcoBank recruited in Cameroon.
No kidding. So you're a man that knows how to seize opportunities.
Yes.
That's just unbelievable.
I can see it coming from a long way.
Yes.
So I went now to Ghana, and that's how I started building my international network. I went to Ghana, and from then on, it's just been a different story.
The rest is history. You see, now, the reason I'm interviewing him is not because I knew him 30 years ago. is because of what this man has accomplished in his life. And you're supposed to pay attention to the fact that he just told you it's a rags to riches story. Would you agree? Like, not really rags, because you went to real prestigious schools. But in Africa and Cameroon in particular, the opportunities are limited. And you were able to just seize every opportunity. It didn't matter if it was office administration or was assistant. The big jobs you go, it's like as long as you're on your journey, you're doing it. And now you are a member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants of the United Kingdom. It sounds so massive, and I'm sure it is. What does that mean? What do you do? What's the title for?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of hard work
Yes.
and dedication
Yes.
and resilience that comes into what you probably just see.
Right.
You're seeing an end product.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of sacrifice.
The journey.
The journey, it's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of that struggling moments. So I finished my MBA. I'm a chartered management accountant, and I've continued to educate myself. I continue to educate myself by doing refresher courses, and I must say, at one point in my life, one of my best friends actually offered to pay me to go and do another MBA in Wharton, and I said to him, at the same time, I have an opportunity to be the managing director to set up a bank in the DRC.
Yes.
So we had a long conversation. Which one should we take? But at the end of the day, we said, look, the experience of setting up a financial institution in a country like the DRC is more challenging and more exciting than going to do a second MBA in Wharton.
Yes.
So I took the option to go to the DRC, where I spent almost 2 years trying to build a financial institution. And I built one of the most successful institutions in the DRC from scratch, working with the central bank to obtain the technical licenses for the bank, and then walking through the corridors of power to get the agreement of the cabinet and the agreement of the head of state to establish a financial institution, the first after almost 7 years of war in the country. Can you believe that the government thought that a financial institution like a bank will come in to finance the opposition? And I had to convince them. There were 60 members of cabinet. I had to go each and every one of them, and without necessarily influencing them or paying anybody a bribe, because people will think doing business in Africa is about corruption.
Yes.
Convincing them that it is in the interest of the country to build strong financial institutions.
Absolutely.
Getting them through that journey. It took a lot of time. It was very painful. But at the end of the day, I put the first automatic teller machines in the DRC, where people could go to a bank or to an ATM machine and collect their money. When I started banking in the DRC, they had 20,000 bank accounts. Wow. When I left the DRC, they had over 1 million bank accounts. We moved the entire civil service from manual or cash transactions into the banking sector. Because we brought technology, we brought innovation, and we said to them, look, the only way you can change some of these things is by bringing your people to the banking sector.
That's very interesting. So what is your own job as the global head of client relations at the African Export-Import Bank?
So what I do basically for the bank is I'm responsible for the bank's coverage, origination, and the bank's credit process.
Okay.
So what we do is we interact with the customers. So I interact with these countries, first of all, to understand what their requirements are.
Okay.
So for all the countries, we need to understand their national development plans. We need to understand their development priorities. So we speak to the heads of states, the governors of the central banks, the ministers of finance, the large corporates, the large banks in the country. We understand what kind of financing they require. We structure this financing, working with my different product partners in the banks. We separate them. So it might be a project finance solution to build a 50 megawatt of electricity project. Maybe it's a thermal project. Maybe it's a hydro project. Maybe it's a renewable energy project that will provide electricity to local communities. I work with my project finance teams now to deliver these solutions. We go through the bank's credit process, ensure that it's approved by the bank's internal committees, up to the board. We document it with external lawyers, and then we deliver to the bank, to the government. And we have to follow up. If you have an EPC contractor who is going to build the plant, you have to monitor to ensure that they build the plant to the standards. And commission the plant, and then the plant starts working. It doesn't end there. You have to make sure that the plant is generating the revenue to be able to pay that loan.
Wow.
So it's a real journey and it's a real process.
It's a big process. So can you tell us about some of your successes doing this in terms of the projects that you've been able to oversee and that have come to fruition and that are thriving?
Well, I must say that successes, I don't know about successes, but
those that are thriving.
The important thing, what I see is that the work that we do contributes positively to countries.
Has impact.
Has impact. I can give you an example, whether it's by creating jobs or by giving satisfaction. I'll give you an example.
Yes.
In August this year, we went to Niamey, where the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was being launched by African sets of states on the sidelines of the African Union meeting in Niamey. The Republic of Niamey, the Republic of Niger, whose capital is Niamey, actually knew they were organizing this AU meeting like 18 months ago.
Right.
But I don't know for those of you who have been to Niger, Niger didn't have the right infrastructure in terms of an airport or in terms of simple hotel accommodation. So we sat down and worked with the company and structured the construction and the rehabilitation of the airport and structured the financing of a hotel. When we went to Niger now, to Niamey for the AU meeting, can you imagine the satisfaction internally of landing at an airport where you knew that you sat from design, construction, financing, or going to the hotel where you knew that you contributed to final this. And this same thing also happened to me when I spent time in Rwanda. Rwanda today has transformed, but there were people that sat down to think how to build Rwanda.
Correct.
Unfortunately, I was in a position at the time where I was very close to the Rwandan authorities, given my role as a banker in Kigali.
Yes.
And we sat with their company called Crystal Ventures and looked at what were the priority sectors. They also picked their airline, they picked their convention center because they wanted to be a tourism hub. And we supported that project. I remember asking my investment banking team to come to Kigali to work with me, but they were like, René, what are we going to do in Kigali? It's a very small place. But the guys came, the guys saw, and the guys believed. And we started the journey. And today, the success story around Rwanda Air or the success story around the Kigali Convention Center is something that is globally recognized. So I say these are just examples of the kind of impact that you see in people's lives, that you create in people's lives. Jobs have been created. You can actually see infrastructure.
You see the country thriving.
In DRC, for example, I can say that people have access to financial services.
Yeah.
People have,
the things we take for granted.
Yes.
On a daily
basis. Which you don't in the world, in the Western world.
Yeah.
These are things that are normal.
Like just simple. You even have a laptop or a phone. You can actually do business transactions digitally. And before the African Import Bank, right? What institutions do we have? What institution were we using to do this kind of trade or investment or raising capital? Because I'm sure where there's opportunity, there's been a vacuum somewhere, and I know somebody was there. So who was been competing with you? Who would you look at as a competitor?
So the African Export-Import Bank was actually created 26 years ago.
Yes. But that's not too long ago.
Yes, by African heads of state who actually saw that there was a vacuum in the market.
Yes.
This was a time when it was all about World Bank.
That's what I was thinking.
Structural adjustment programs to Africa.
Yes, that destroyed us, basically.
The African countries were going through a lot of economic challenges.
Yeah.
They had the global financial crisis, and all they were receiving was instructions from Washington.
An accumulation of debt.
An accumulation of debt. So the African heads of state said at the time, under the visionary leadership of President Babacar Ndiaye, the Senegalese who was the head of the African Development Bank. He was a visionary and he's a founding father of this bank.
That's good to know.
So they actually said we need to have an institution owned by Africans, run by Africans, to finance African infrastructure projects and provide trade finance to Africa. That's how the bank was set up by China, by charter. So you're right. Before then, there was a gap, there was a demand in the market, but there were no institutions that were servicing that demand. So they put together the African Export-Import Bank using African capital, So let me just give you an example.
Wait a minute. Are you listening to yourself? Who's to say that Africa can do stuff? Because every time you hear stories about Africa, it's never a success.
So let me tell you one thing we are trying to do.
For it.
Today, Over $400 billion
Yes.
of African money is sitting in Western institutions as reserves.
Yeah.
Which means the central banks of African countries
Yes.
take their money and place it in Switzerland
Yeah.
or in New York or Washington with financial institutions. Those same financial institutions take that money and lend back to the African
Can you
countries,
believe it?
giving them instructions as
use
to
them.
how to use the money.
To use their own money.
We are saying to them that there's something called African resource mobilization. Ladies and gentlemen, we can use our own money to develop our continent. Even if we manage to just bring back only 10% of that money back to Africa, it's a good starting point. A few African leaders are getting it now, and they're actually saying to their people and to their institutions, we have to use our own resources to develop ourselves. We can't continue to wait for other people to come and develop ourselves. So we have a program that we started in the bank called African Resource Mobilization. This thing has been going on for the last 3 years, and it's a very successful program. We've raised over $10 billion from African financial institutions, and we hope that we will continue to rely on the confidence of Africans themselves to bring back their capital into the continent and use it to develop their own projects.
That's just awesome. So for people in the diaspora, I know you talked about the 54 countries, but there are like 52 members of the bank. How about the diaspora?
The diaspora is a very, very important part of our business. We attach a lot of importance to the diaspora. We consider the diaspora as the 55th African country.
Yes.
If you look at it, the GDP of the diaspora is larger than the GDP of the top 3 African countries.
And that's true.
If you consider the diaspora as a country.
That's true.
How can the diaspora be relevant to its people?
That's the question.
Today, if you look at migrant remittances goes a long way further than foreign direct investment in any African country. Migrant remittances today have surpassed FDI going into Africa.
No kidding.
So we just had a meeting this morning with one of the African heads of states, and we're going to put together a diaspora bond to support a textile project in that country. The country can use the diaspora bond to fund its own equity while we can finance the debt. So that's just an example of how the diaspora can be very relevant to the development work that's going on in Africa.
So what would the structure be like? How would I utilize that structure, the diaspora bond?
So we would put together a structure, a bond, which we'll probably underwrite and guarantee. We will sell that bond to Africans who are sitting in the diaspora. Africans will invest their money in that bond, where they will get a significant return. Only last night I was speaking to somebody, I think in Atlanta, and they're saying to me, how do I invest my money back in Africa?
And that's the
how
question.
do I invest my money back in my homeland? These kind of instruments give them an opportunity where they can place their savings, their money, and have a return, a consistent return over a period of time. At the same time, their own money is contributing to the development of their continent, the development of their country. So there is a lot of scope for collaboration. Also look at the diaspora private sector. A lot of the people in the diaspora are very, 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 very important professionals in whatever industry that they are in. They are professionals in finance, they are professionals in healthcare, they are medical doctors, they are professionals in science and engineering. We also look at how we can transfer that knowledge back to the continent.
Now, let me ask you, not to interrupt, but there are lots of Africans in the diaspora, like you said, who want to invest. But I know your criteria is the corporate, you have to be part of a corporation. So for the diaspora, potential investors, would they have to then, because you know, like the Africans tend to have these organizations like a Nigerian Doctors Association. You know, Africans in the diaspora are very much into their little groups and communities. Those communities are currently invest. I know a Cameroonian lady who actually built a hospital in her village in Bafut, and she used hard-earned money. The reason I'm asking this question is because we have a lot of challenges in the diaspora, constantly trying to raise funds to do projects back home. Want to build hospitals, want to build schools. I personally want to build libraries and, entertainment centers. So,
yeah, at the back
yes.
of every corporate is an individual.
Yes.
So there's a journey. You have to be able to institutionalize your ideas and the processes.
Okay.
So the community of doctors can come together.
Yes.
They can create a structure. They can create an SPV, a special purpose vehicle,
Okay.
to make that investment wherever they want to.
Yes.
We've just completed a hospital in Nigeria now, which
Okay.
was done by a community of doctors.
Yeah.
So they would come together, they'll have the idea, they'll create the SPV, they put in some equity, and they can source the debt. So nothing stops the local Cameroonian diaspora
Right.
coming together, creating a private company, so seeking debt
Yes.
to develop a project where they
Project.
have the right skills, they have the competencies, and that will generate revenue for them as an investment.
Yes.
We can provide advisory services. We do have
Okay.
we have an advisory team, a capital markets and advisory team. We can provide advisory services to these kinds of individuals as to how they can go about their investments on the continent.
This is such good news. You don't even know. This is such good news because we have tapped out of a little, there's so many projects, so many fundraisers going on, and it's the same community, but to know that there's an institution that you can organize yourselves and table a project and then take it from there. Did I say that correctly? Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Now, you have traveled extensively, and I want us to switch gears a little bit. The world as we see it, there are obstacles that really have challenged African countries. What do you think are some of, because now we're talking, for example, about diasporans putting their heads together and working, and there's been this notion that we don't work together very well. So what do you think are some of the impediments, based on your experience with other communities that would do something like this? What mindset do we need to have to change the narrative? When I say narrative, in terms of how we work with the continent and each other.
I think the first thing which you can see is that the narrative and the perception of the continent is not in the right.
Two different things.
It's not in the right place.
Okay.
So increasingly, we need to position the continent in the right place, and there's some work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
In positioning the continent in the right space. I think the signature of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is one of those steps to show that we are working together to build a single market which is going to have 1.4 billion people.
Right.
And I give you a simple example. I've been in an airport in Dublin. I've seen 140 Chinese kids coming together on a plane and going into Ireland. I've been in a train station in Paris. I've seen 200 Chinese kids coming through and going through into the UK. I've never seen 5 Africans traveling together. Yeah. So that says that we need to come together.
Yes.
The geographical boundaries that were set up by the Bismarck Conference by the West, they're just boundaries.
They're just boundaries.
Africa needs to start doing things common because of scale. If you want to do a power project, do a power project that is a regional power project. Okay. If you want to build a road or a railway, that's a regional project. If you want to generate industry, do something that is scalable. Because in today's economies, you have to have, if you have a population of 1 million people, or a population of 5 million people, it is not sustainable to be able to develop the kind of infrastructure or the kind of, to generate the kind of returns that you expect for investment. Absolutely. So investors are not going to come and look at that. Scale is very important. So it is important for our leaders and for our people to look at themselves as groupings. So we see that.
Yeah, the individualistic thinking needs to go.
We have to move away from that.
Yeah.
We have to move away from that. There is no reason why we shouldn't build a railway that leaves Douala and goes to N'Djamena.
I know.
Going through Central African Republic. Because in that case, you can consider the Douala port as the point of entry for all of Central Africa.
Is it a question of trust? We've been conditioned not to trust each other, or have you seen? Because why would you see a train or an airline with 100 or 30 Chinese children and we don't have that?
National pride and sovereignty. Not very much of trust. But I see it more of national pride and sovereignty. But people need to move away from that and say, look, the global dynamics doesn't speak to. There are certain things that can remain sovereign, like defense. But hang on, we're talking about financial viability.
Absolutely.
If you have to do something which is financially viable, the thing has to have the scale to reach to the markets where you can generate the kind of revenue.
You need to go beyond subsistence. You need to go beyond subsistence and really, like you said, be scalable. It's so interesting because there's so much. Africans are described as being individually very successful. But as a unit, as a collective, we're really lacking in that. And I think it's true based on what you're saying, and we need to start thinking more collectively, regionally, as opposed to thinking about my little space. Cameroon has population. Look at Nigeria. Look at the population of Nigeria. If we incorporated Nigeria into a project.
If you just develop the infrastructure between the borders of Cameroon and Nigeria, which spans something like 1,700
build some freeways and.
You cannot believe the amount of trade that will happen between Nigeria and Cameroon.
There you go.
And today, Cameroon, for example, is the breadbasket of Gabon. All the food that they consume in Equatorial Guinea or Gabon, 80% of that food comes from Cameroon. But we should look at this as markets.
Yes.
We should integrate, we should build systems, financial infrastructure to facilitate and enable that trade. And that's why we at the African Export-Import Bank, we look at intra-African trade as one of the key pillars of development. We need to move. Today, intra-African trade is around 18%. Why is it there? Why is it that Cameroon is producing something that Gabon needs, but Gabon is buying that thing from France?
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
So we have to bring down all those barriers. We have to bring down those pillars. We need to facilitate that trade.
When is this Diaspora Bond going to be launched or made available?
Well, the Diaspora Bonds can be done for each community.
Okay.
This particular one, we just started the discussions now,
okay,
so maybe we'll have discussion. We've done one previously for Zimbabwe. We are considering one now for Burkina Faso, for the Burkina Faso diaspora in the US. We can always provide those to Cameroonians in France, Cameroonians in the US to do a diaspora. I always had this idea, let me tell you, and I've spoken to my friends and I don't see why they don't get it. If you look at the northwest province of Cameroon where we come from, you've heard about the ring road several times.
Since I was a child.
Since you were a child.
Yes.
But where is this ring road? Now, we don't have to wait on government to do this ring road.
Okay.
We as Cameroonians, we as elites can structure the construction of this ring road. What do we need?
But before you go into that, René, you do recognize that sometimes the government's permits, you can only do so much, because from what I understood about that ring road, the late Nanga wanted to build it and he couldn't do it because for some reason, the Cameroon government didn't give him the permission to do it, basically.
No, I disagree.
Oh, really?
I disagree.
So, okay, how can we go, just in case government is an impediment? Yes.
I disagree.
Yes.
We need to create a special purpose vehicle, which is a public sector, private sector vehicle. You can do it this way. You can create a company which is owned by all the divisions. So Mezam, Momo, Manu, Ndian, Bui can create a company that they all own. That is government.
Okay.
They provide the regulatory support.
Okay.
That company, created and owned by them, okay, will do a tender, will award a contract to an EPC contractor, who would build and operate that road. EPC contractor will build and operate that road. Now, that company will go on a fundraising, because they don't have the money to build that road. They go on a fundraising where they can do a graphy bond to raise capital from Cameroonians in the diaspora to be able to build that ring road. Now, how do they get paid back? They can get paid back by putting a toll on that ring road. That SPV, right? That SPV is going to be the borrower.
Yes.
That EPC which will build the engineering procurement company will also be an operator. Can get a concession for 25, you can model it, 25, 50 years to be the operator of that ring road. Now, they will take their costs, which will be the operational costs. They will take the servicing of that debt, and they can have a fee sharing of benefits now to this SPV and benefits now to themselves. But they can model. So 50 trucks are going to Nigeria. They will pay a toll of $1 each. I don't know, 1 cent, 1 CFA. And they can model over time how they're going to repay that loan. So in that case, you don't need the central government. You don't need your own day. You have done an SPV with the local community. You've raised financing, and you can give this to, you don't need to bring an international company. There are Northwesterners and Southwesterners that own construction companies. You can give the contracts to them. And as I say, I don't have the statistics. I don't know how many Cameroonians are in the diaspora. But if you had that kind of a project, you said, I was going to raise $500 million to do the ring road. You can raise $500 million from the Cameroonian diaspora by doing a bond. You can do a 15-year bond with a bullet repayment, or you can do a 15-year bond with a coupon repayment, whatever structures you want. The capital is there. But we just need to create the right enabling environment to be able to attract that capital.
You know what? That is very, very true. That's why you're the expert. What did I say again? You're one of Africa's most influential finance professionals. So, did you always have this mindset though? Growing up, being so ambitious and curious and everything. Where does mindset come from?
The trouble is, I wake up every day and I have to think 1 year ahead. Otherwise, I'm not relevant.
No. So where did you get this? Where did this mindset start? Back home as a child or later in life?
As a child, I've always tried to be ahead of the game.
That's
if you do not, even today, if I don't think 1 year ahead, I'm not going to be relevant.
That's
the
true.
expectations are extremely high. The expectations, the pressures, the expectations are extremely high on us. So we have to make sure that we can provide the right kind of service to our people.
So how do we retrain the minds of young people? Because really, because all of what we're talking about here, it's good, but are we ready? Are the children of Africa ready for, this 21st century kind of mindset, kind of thinking?
No, I think we need to prepare our youth for the future. The first thing is they need to be patient. Everything has a time. In today's world, first of all, because of the digitalization of the world, people aspire and they want to jump.
That's true.
To get to the end. Success will always come. As I said to you, there's a lot of hard work. The youth, particularly our Cameroonian youth, they have to have the right education. They have to have the humility. They have to learn. They have to make mistakes. They have to learn, but they will get there. But what I see is we have destroyed the moral values in our communities and our society over the last 15, 20 years.
Moral values.
Yes. The people, what they look at success in Cameroon is not success. What young people aspire to is not success. We need to we need to redirect that and get people to be able to move on the right journey to get to success. And there's so many ingredients. One, the fundamental one is education. We must give our people, we must give our children the right and the good quality education.
What is good quality education?
Good quality education starts from your family.
Correct.
The moral values that of integrity, the moral values of justice, the moral values of humility, the moral values of truth, the moral values of respect, the moral values of understanding. We have to build that first in our families, build that in the schools where we send our kids, and then train them. And then we need to move away from general education into vocational education. People should train to be a mechanic. People should train to be a plumber. People should train to be a technician. People should train to deliver things that are productive. All of us cannot go to school to be literature or to learn English. All of us cannot go to school to learn law because we cannot be lawyers. So our curriculum has to change.
Where do passion, where does passion then meet ability and opportunity, basically?
The passion is the driving force for every one of us. If you don't have passion in what you do, if you don't like what you do, if you don't enthuse in what you do,
Yes.
you can't succeed. You're just going to be one of them. But before passion, the environment needs to be created for people to be in the right things.
To nurture.
Yes, to nurture the right things. That's what I'm saying. We need to rejig the way we are training our people.
Yes.
We should say we want to train for 1,000 engineers. We want to train for 1,000 pilots. We want to train for in Cameroon we have an oil and gas sector.
Right.
How many people are trained in oil and gas, in geology? How many people are trained in oil services? We say we have agriculture. How many people are trained in agriculture?
So do you believe that children should do what they like to do, or should they do what is available, the opportunities? Or is
No,
there
people should, there's a difference.
I mean, for our
between-
children.
There's a difference between like and reality. So
Yes.
people should adapt to
Yeah.
the realities of life.
Yes.
I believe that should adapt. So I can like to ride a white horse, but I may not be able to ride that horse.
Yes.
But I have to adapt to take a taxi.
Okay. Maybe do this while waiting till I can get that. You know, the survival. To survive, you have to first of all be able to survive, and then you can get there.
Exactly.
I'm really curious to know. Every successful person has habits that shape them. Number one, what's your definition of success? And number two, what are your habits?
I think success for me is in hard work. Success for me is in preparation. Everything you do, you have to prepare. You have to plan.
Right.
Things don't happen by surprise. And you have to plan well ahead of time. Whether it's a meeting, whether it's an event, whether it's you have to have a game plan in your life.
Yeah.
You have to know what you are going to do. I always have plans. I write down in 2 months, in 3 months, in 1 year. I aspire to something.
Now your objectives.
Yeah, you have to have objectives. I do my own annual assessment. At the end of the year, I say, René, what have you accomplished this year? You say, oh, 2016 was a waste. I didn't do anything. You have to be difficult on yourself because you aspire to something. You can't just wait for things to come. Habits, what can I say?
Like when you wake up, some people, for me, for example, when I wake up in the morning, I want to make sure that if I don't have my to-do list, I'm in trouble. Because I'll just be like doing any kind of thing. It's like eating randomly. So I don't like to randomly eat. So then, in terms of professionalism and trying to run my company, I have to write down my to-dos, and then I go and I check and I check. So I want to know if you have like a system that keeps you in check.
I drive a global business with very, very high objectives.
I can imagine. Yes.
So my habits, I check every day what are we going to close today?
Right.
And I try to influence how we get to the bottom of that thing.
Yes.
On a daily basis. So my days are very different.
Yes.
None of my 2 days are ever the same.
That's true. That's true.
None of my 2 days can ever be the same. None of them can ever be the same. Because I'm always trying to make sure that I meet some set objectives.
So, René, what's the next objective or next 5 years for you now? What are you aspiring for?
I think I'm still committed to my institution.
Right.
Committed to my institution. I'm committed to developing the continent.
Okay.
I have gained over the last 25 years a lot of experience. I have built strong relationships, but we need to take opportunity of these relationships.
Yes.
We need to mine these.
Yes.
We need to mine the value out of these relationships. So I have some ideas. At a Pan-African level,
Yeah.
and being global, how do we mine those relationships? How do we extract value out of all the experience I've gained
Yes.
over the last 25 years to some productive channels?
Yes.
So that kind of thinking is going.
Yes.
I don't think it's in one thing. I think it's going to be in industry. It's going to be in business. I think it's going to be in giving back.
Giving
I
back.
believe in giving
At some
back.
point,
I have to
you've
give back to the
accomplished so much,
community.
you have to give back. And I'm glad you mentioned you used the word networking. For young people listening, or some, aspiring entrepreneur, someone that wants to do something different, where does networking fit in relationships in success?
I have $1 billion in relationships. I have $1 billion in relationships. Relationships is the strongest thing in the world.
It's the biggest currency.
It's the biggest currency. For me, that is my strength. My strength is relationships. And you have to nourish relationships. Relationships are not just I give you a business card, you give me a business card.
And so I'm expecting.
People need to feel you
Yes.
on a daily basis.
Yes.
People need to understand you. You need to understand them. You need to meet them where they are. You need to connect with them. How do you do that? It's a very demanding. Sometimes I wake up on a day, I call 5 people I haven't spoken to for the last 3 months, and just to say them, how are you doing?
How are you doing?
And I don't want to talk business. I say,
I don't need anything.
how is that your child?
Yes.
Or how is that thing going? And people love that. In Africa, for example, there's no country in Africa where I haven't managed to have those kind of relationships. And it's simple things. I go to a country and I don't stay in a hotel. I go to somebody's house and I stay with that person. Whether it's a colleague or is a friend, you stay with them because you bond with them. You eat with them on the same table. You understand them better. It's become something.
Isn't it said that people do business with people they love?
Yes. No, they relate to you.
That they relate to.
You understand them
Yes.
better. Understand them. If they're coming to, I was in Kampala last week, and a very senior guy whom I've known for maybe 10, 15 years, he asked to come for breakfast. I said, come at 11. I thought he was going to go to church. But he showed up with his wife, his daughter, and his grandson. Because I didn't remember a few years back, I had received him back at home in London. And he still kept that memory. And it turned out that a lot of the things I wanted to do, he was key in it, and he was very contributing. So I believe that you need to nourish, you need to manage your relationships in such a way that it's constant.
Yes. You know, that's really interesting. How about, I want to ask you a question, personal question. Family. How do you manage family, balance family, and all of this?
I'm not the best person here. I must admit to you.
Okay.
I'm
Have
not
you
the
had to
best.
sacrifice?
It's a huge sacrifice.
Yeah.
I'm not the best person here. Because my model was just pay the bill.
Yes.
But pay the bill without being there is not the right thing to do. So I'm not going to ask anybody to follow my
example.
But you see, the work we are doing,
Yes.
let me tell you something. Before Africa got its independence, there were people that were in the bush.
Somebody made
fighting.
sacrifices.
The Nkrumahs, the
Yes.
secretaries, okay? They had to fight for
Yes.
people to have their independence.
Yeah.
That was political independence. What we are fighting for now is economic independence.
I love that.
And we have to sacrifice something.
Yeah.
So my poor little daughter that doesn't have to see me has to understand that her dad is fighting for a future that will be better for her and her grandchildren.
Financial freedom.
Yes.
Economic freedom.
Yes. So it is
Everything.
It is very difficult because I don't have work-life balance.
Yeah.
I send emails to people at 2 a.m. I respond to at 2 a.m. in the night. I respond to emails at 2 a.m.
So what you're saying essentially is that to hit those milestones, sometimes you have to make sacrifices.
You have to make significant sacrifices.
And what about some of the values like patience? Because all of this, and I see the trajectory of the growth, it's been a lot. And, you know, young people, someone who watch you now on this show and think, oh, I can do this, it's doable, as long as what?
As I said initially, Ellie, things don't happen overnight.
That's right, be patient.
Yes, you have to have a path. You have to build on things every day. You can't expect to have results immediately.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
It's
a learning process. It's a journey. As I said to you 30 years ago, we would never have imagined that we'll be sitting here in New York at the 40th floor having this conversation.
Yes.
But it's a journey.
Yeah.
You cannot skip the steps.
Do you have anybody that inspired you, that has inspired you, that you look up to and keeps you on your feet?
God.
God.
Because I never had a mentor. I never had a family name. I never had somebody saying that this job is for René, this land is for René, this car is for René, this is for René. No, I didn't have any of those. I never had somebody that says, you're going to go to this place and become this. But God, you have to have strong belief in God.
Yeah.
I remember once, I joined a company. When I left British Council, I took a pay cut of almost, you can't believe it, a huge pay cut to switch from there to get into banking. But I told the guys in HR, watch this space. In 1 year time, you're going to pay me triple this amount of money. In less than 6 months, the guys kicked out the guy who was my boss and put me in their position. So God is always there.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's so much more in store for you.
Thank you.
The sky is the limit. I mean, beyond the sky is the limit, if there's such a thing. And thank you for joining us and inspiring young people. And this is our show, Africa Speaks, where we really bring African voices to the forefront. And I hope you learned something today. Go for it. Whatever you dream of, it can happen.